Great. So on to our next speaker. So Matt Hood is the founder and principal at Oak National Academy, which was created in April 2020 in response to the situation caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Its purpose was to ensure learning continued during this period by providing teachers and pupils with online resources and lessons. Since then, the school has developed 40,000 resources with the support of 550 teachers and delivered over 130 million lessons in their online classroom. Matt's going to talk to us about what he's learned about educational technology over the past 18 months and just how these insights can inform education provision in the future. So Matt, are you there? There we go. Right, I'll hand over to you, Matt.
Hello, and thanks for having me today. I'll try and keep it brief to maximise the amount of time for questions because I'm really keen to hear from folks on the call today and answer any questions that you might have. What I'm going to try to do today is share a few of the insights about Oak National Academy and what we've learned about remote education over the past 18 months or so. And for those of you who don't know us, we're a government-backed national online school, and we were set up by a group of teachers in the Easter holidays of the first lockdown back in April 2020. We have about 10,000 lessons on our site, about 40,000 resources in total that cover everything that a 4-year-old to a 16-year-old would cover in a normal school here in England. We have been used by about 14,000 schools so far, and pupils have completed about 132 million lessons. At the peak of the pandemic, about 2.5 million pupils per week were doing their lessons with us, as opposed to the normal school that they attend. We've got about 20 different subjects on the site, and it's all free. And if you haven't had a poke around, you'd be very welcome to. Please just go to the national.academy, and all the resources and everything is on there available for you. So I want to share 3 interesting insights from the past 18 months. And it's worth saying up front that I'm not an education technology evangelist. I'm an economics teacher by training, but didn't have a particular interest in technology. And so really everything here it's been relatively new to me and learned from scratch. And the first thing that I think it's worth reflecting on is that the literature about online learning doesn't actually tell us very much. And even when it does tell us or point us in the direction to approaches that might be effective with our pupils, that direction that it's pointing to could be wrong. When we started creating our 10,000 lessons, we did that in about 3 weeks over the summer holidays in 2020. We commissioned a literature review to look at the evidence about online learning and what it might tell us. The review brought back about 638 international research papers that made some reference to online learning. But when we filtered those research papers for those that had features of high quality empirical research, we found only about 45 of them were actually relevant. The rest were at best anecdotal. Then when we filtered those 45 papers to look at insights that were particularly relevant for primary or secondary age pupils, we were actually left with 12 papers in total that might point the way as to how we should design and deliver these lessons to pupils. Now, there was a study by Guo et al. In 2014 as part of those remaining 12 papers that, again, were both high quality and referenced specifically primary and secondary age pupils, as opposed to university students or adults doing MOOCs. That's where most of the research is. We compared the findings of that Guo et al. Paper with our own analytics. We looked at about 10,000 lessons that pupils took part in between January and February of earlier this year. Now, the Guo et al. Research says that video should be capped at 6 minutes. It said that basically in each of your lessons, don't have any individual video longer than 6 minutes. If you have a video longer than 6 minutes, you start to see engagement drop off pretty significantly. However, The data from Oak National Academy, when we've run the same study, shows that videos have video length has a negligible impact on pupil engagement. In fact, there are a whole range of other factors, even when we pick them at random, that better explained drop off in pupil engagement more than video caps at 6 minutes did. So first, interesting insight from this is, don't think that there's some magical answer out there that's been discovered in the literature around remote learning or remote education. It's at best very, very thin. That said, and I think this builds on some of the things that the previous two speakers tonight have spoken about, we can still make really good bets about what works in remote education based on the wider literature and our professional expertise about what works in classrooms day to day. We use this framework, which broadly walks you through the different stages that you need to go through to design and execute a high quality lesson in any context with any human anywhere. We need to be thinking about where what it is we're about to teach sits in a wider curriculum. We need to build pupils' motivation so they own the thing that they're about to take part in. We need to frame that learning so we activate prior knowledge by reminding pupils about what's come before and where this fits in their wider schema. We need to explain things really carefully and clearly. We need to help pupils use that knowledge independently in increasingly complex situations. We need to build in opportunities for them to remember what it is that they've been taught over time. And we need to be continuously checking each of those stages to make sure that we're fine-tuning them wherever possible. So despite the literature not telling as much, what we were able to fall back on was the wider body of literature about just what makes good teaching and learning in classrooms. And then all we did was place additional emphasis in certain places where an online environment made things slightly more challenging. Pupil motivation is something that you need to think a little bit harder about online because the pupils aren't in a handy room. They're not sat in desks facing you. They can't, just get up and wander and get a biscuit out of the jar whenever they feel like it midway through the lesson. If you want to own it right, you need to think a little bit more carefully about what that might look like. Similarly, in an online environment, the feedback loop between you and pupils is either disrupted in an online format or, in a synchronous format, or completely broken in the case of Oak National Academy, right? All of our lessons are asynchronous. They're not live lessons. And so we have to think about other ways around that. The third thing that I want to share with you and leave you with before we answer questions is that all of this work is affected by deprivation, and we need to take that very seriously and think very carefully about it. This is a complicated slide, so let me just walk you through it. The graph on the left shows across our 130 million lessons, how many of those lessons were accessed via a computer rather than a tablet or a mobile device. And on the bottom axis, we have different Adaki quintiles. Adaki is the Income Deprivation Affecting Children Index. It's a measure of poverty, and it's a very specific measure. It goes down to individual postcodes. It's divided into, all of these postcodes are divided into 5 quintiles, 5 being the most deprived area, 1 being the least deprived areas. So what you can see here is 78% in the 20% richest postcodes in England were accessed on a computer as opposed to a mobile or a tablet device. 69.4% in the most deprived postcodes accessed via a computer as opposed to a mobile or a tablet device. What you can also see then on the right-hand side here is the comparative median session length by device. And what we see is that pupils who take part in remote education via a laptop or desktop device stick with it for 5 times longer than those who take part via a mobile device. There is one challenge when it comes to remote education of making sure every pupil has a device, but we also need to remember that not all devices are created equal. And actually, if we're to level the playing field and address this access issue that we have, we need to make sure that all pupils have a laptop or desktop device free from the pinging distractions that your mobile phone is hardwired to send to you on every given occasion, except for tonight, ironically, when Facebook and WhatsApp and God knows what other social media platforms are all down. A brilliant evening for remote education and learning. So the third insight that I wanted to leave you with this evening, number one, the literature doesn't tell us much. If you're doing this and you're looking out there for what else works, and finding high quality empirical studies that have been done on primary and secondary age pupils don't exist. And even when they do exist, we think some of those findings need re-examining. Number two, you should always just fall back on what you know as a teacher. All of the things that you do in your normal classroom day to day translate into any synchronous or asynchronous online learning, and lean on and rely on those rather than thinking because the medium's different, somehow the rules have magically changed. And third, before you heavily lean on this as an approach for all of your pupils, think really carefully about access, not just have they got a device and does that device have the data associated with it. It's worth saying that Oak National Academy is 0 rated, so there are no data charges associated with using our platform. But you don't just need to make sure they've got a device, you need to make sure that it's a laptop or desktop device, and ideally that every pupil in the household has one. I will stop there, but I can see some questions coming in, and I'll hand back to you, David, and take as many questions as we've got time for.
Thanks, Matt, very much.